to introduce today's webinar chair, Cheryl Swales, Project Manager from AALP. Cheryl, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jill, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Future Apprenticeship webinar. This webinar is being brought to you as part of the Future Apprenticeships programme, which is funded by the Education Training Foundation and, of course, delivered by AALP and partners. So as Jill mentioned, my name's Cheryl Swales. I'm Project Manager at AALP and I will be chairing the webinar today. It's great that we've got so many people registered to attend. We've got a good few number of attendees on the live webinar now, and we've also got such a wide variety of organisations. This is obviously a topic that's key to everybody. So we've got a mix of organisations that might be familiar with the system already and require an update, but also those who are brand new to it. Obviously, it's vital for everybody to know how to submit the most accurate learner and employer data to the ESFA to ultimately draw down your funding. The great thing about these webinars, as Jill said, is that they are recorded, so you can go away today with a resource that you can use within your teams to cascade the information down. My role as chair today is I will be keeping a close eye on all of the questions that you will be submitting over the next half an hour or so, and I will work with Lynn at the end and we will have a little bit of a Q&A session. So please do submit your questions using the questions pane. We will be expecting a high number of questions just with regards to the topic and the amount of people viewing today. So if I don't read your question out, we will answer that in the Q&A document. So please watch out for that coming through. So now we're all sitting comfortably. It's now my pleasure to introduce your facilitator this morning, Lynn Burden, Product Owner of Data Collections from the ESFA. Lynn is responsible for the hub, learner entry tool and software to help you check your data files. She manages the team who develops these applications and also the operational team who manage the day-to-day running of it, and also has loads of experience, has previously worked on the service desk responding to provider queries, and has worked in the data collection team for 3 years. So I think you really are in the hands of an expert. So without further ado, I will hand over to Lynn. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll just click through. So today's webinar is covering the hub and data submissions with a particular focus on the learner entry tool. And as Cheryl said, please do ask questions that we'll try to get through at the end of the session. So to begin with, I just want to talk about the ILR. So the Individualised Learner Record, known as the ILR, is a collection of information about learners and their learning. And hopefully most of the data that is required is information that training organisations are already recording as part of their own business processes. Full details of the data that's required is published in the ILR specification. So that document is published on gov.uk. It is updated periodically through the year if there are any changes, although those are kept to minimum. And a new version is published for every academic year. So the first version for 18-19 is already available, so you can already start to see the potential changes for the coming year. The Education and Skills Funding Agency has a funding calculation that processes the learner data you submit in the ILR file, and it calculates the payments to training organisations. So what we're going to look at today is a kind of a system flow chart, so an overview of the end-to-end process. So we'll begin with talking about some of the reference data that is required. We'll then move on to the ILR learner entry tools, or MI systems. Then through to FIS, which is the Funding Information System, which is a piece of software that allows you to validate your file. And then finally the hub. The hub is where you submit your data to us, and it's that data that will drive your payments. So the first piece of reference data is the ULN, so the unique learner number. This is a number that is allocated to all learners from age 14 plus, and they're now frequently found on the award certificates or result slips that students may have. Now, this is a requirement that you do have this information for all of your learners. The ULNs are issued and held by the Learning Records Service. So you do need to register for an account before you can use this service, and the registration forms and guidance documents are all available on gov.uk, and that information is provided as part of the onboarding communication you receive from the Education and Skills Funding Agency. The Learning Record Service have a dedicated service desk for any queries about their service. Once you're registered, that's where you can go on and check if a ULN already exists for your learner, check the learner's prior attainment, and if they don't have a record, you can generate a ULN for that learner. The next sort of key bit of information is the learning aims data. So the Education and Skills Funding Agency don't fund every qualification that exists. The qualifications known as learning aims that we do fund are published online with the relevant funding information, and a link is included that takes to that part of the website. So to access that information, you do not need an account. It's publicly available information that anyone can access. On the Learning Aims tab, you can search for individual qualifications, apprenticeship frameworks and standards. That will give you information on how much funding you can expect for those qualifications or programmes, the dates that they're available from, and information about the level of the qualification. For the individualised learner record, in addition to the learning aim, we also need to know when the learning will start and when the learning is planned to end, and that information is used to calculate your monthly payments, where the learning is being delivered, who is funding the qualification, which apprenticeship framework or standard the aim is part of, and then when the learning has been completed. So either if the learner achieves the qualification, if they withdraw from that qualification, or if they go on a break in learning, so if they've got a planned absence, for example, for maternity leave or sickness. The next element of reference data that is required is the employer data. So for some learners, we need information on their employer, and this does apply to all learners on an apprenticeship. Each workplace is allocated with a reference number, which training organisations get from the Employer Data Service. You do need to register an account before you can use the Employer Data website, and to register for an account you need your 6-digit UPIN. Now that should have been provided to you in your onboarding communications that you received from the agency. If you need confirmation of that number, the service desk can provide that to you. The EWS website has a user guide published on it to give you information on how you use the site, and there is a dedicated help desk available if you have any problems registering or using the website, and their contact details are included. Now on that website you can search for an existing employer and identify if they have an identification number. If one isn't available, you can request a new number, and the help desk will contact the employer to verify the details and generate that number you need. Those numbers are one per workplace, so an organisation with multiple branches or sites will have multiple numbers based on the postcodes, but one single number can be used by multiple providers. So if an employer has previously engaged with another provider, then a number may exist which you can just find on that website and use for your own learners. So moving on now to preparing ILR files. So a lot of training organisations do have management information systems which they use to input the required data about their learners and the learning they're doing. We do publish a provider support manual and an apprenticeships guide to help organisations code the ILR correctly, and again they're published on gov.uk. The MI systems are used by organisations to run their own business processes and to monitor learners' progress. And they will all have the option to generate and export the required data in a specified ILR file format. The ILR Learner Entry Tool is a piece of software that is provided free of charge by the Education and Skills Funding Agency for organisations who don't have access to a data management system. And it is supported for up to 500 learners in one academic year. The software is downloaded from the useful links area on the front page of the hub, And it will open a zip file, and you just download that onto your desktop or wherever you want to save it on your computer. We do publish a user guide on gov.uk, which includes guidance on how to download and use the software. This tool will allow you to enter your learner data and create the XML ILR file, which you can then validate in Fizz or upload to the hub. So this is the home page of the Learner Entry tool when you open it. On the first time that you open the application, you will need to enter your UK PRN, so that's the 8-digit number allocated to you, and that is used when producing your ILR file, so it's used in the header of the file and in the file name. So it is important that you enter the right number. On this screen, you can also import an XML file. So for example, if you have a file from a previous academic year or from a different MI system, the Export Data button enables you to export your learner records to an XML file, which you can then submit to the hub. When you choose to export the data, it will come up and ask you where you want that file to save, so you can specify the location. If you've already got data in the system, if you click on the Import button, a warning message will come up to say that you're about to replace all of your data currently held in the system. So if you've already got data in the system, you do need to be careful if you're importing anything else. Moving on to the learners section. So in this area, this is where you enter the data for your learners. To begin creating a new record, you click on the Add Learner button. That will open up the page that you see, and the record is split into 3 main sections: learner, learning delivery, and the employment status. Each section consists of a number of different tabs which are made up of different ILR fields. It is important to note that not all ILR fields need to be completed for every learner. In the Provider Support Manual, at the back toward pages 142 to 143, we do provide a list of the fields that are required for apprenticeships, but again, not every field is required because there are dependencies. So for example, if you enter that the learner does have a learning difficulty or disability, we then ask you to declare the category for that record. If you've answered that the learner has declared they don't have a learning difficulty or disability, obviously there isn't a requirement to complete the section about that learning difficulty or disability. So there are dependencies between sections. So we do recommend that you follow the guidance in the ILR specification and the Provider Support Manual when entering your data. So the ILR specification provides a field-by-field guidance on what values can be entered in that field, when it's returned, which learners it's returned for, and give notes on it. The Provider Support Manual is much more scenario-based. So for example, if you've got a learner going on a break in learning, it will talk you through the combination of fields you need to update, what you need to do when they come back from learning. So it's much more there if you've got a situation you've not dealt with previously. When you begin entering a new learner, the top section of the screen will indicate the missing fields. Now this is only the minimum requirements for the learner to be included in the export file. It isn't a full list of the fields required for that learner. So there will be additional fields needed in order for you to get a valid learner record. Now we did have a question in advance about top tips and common errors. So when entering your learner information, in regards to the learning delivery, so that's where you record the aims the learner is studying for. The key things to remember for apprenticeship learners is you need to complete the apprenticeship contract type. So that is whether the learner is levy or non-levy, and that is completed on the programme aim and on the maths English aims only. Also the financial records, that's where you enter the details of the total negotiated price and any employee contributions you've received. That is only recorded on the programme aim. And finally, the structure of an apprenticeship is you need to record a programme aim, which will be has a learning aim reference as ZProg 001, and underneath that you record the component aims, so any of the individual qualifications the learner is studying, for example maths or English. You need to ensure that all of those aims are consistent for the field you're entering for programme type, framework code, apprenticeship standard, otherwise that will generate errors. So they're useful things to kind of just check as you're entering the information. Within the ILR learner entry tool, where a field has a set list of possible values, for example the aim type field, the tool will list the possible entries that you can select, so it won't allow you to put an invalid entry in. But there are a number of free text fields where the number of options are unlimited, for example names or aim references. When you're entering the learner records, the left-hand panel of the screen will show a summary of your learner records, and you can use the filter to search for a particular record. So obviously that gets more useful as your number of learners grow and you won't see them all on that first initial list. Any records that are pink in that left-hand pane will not be included in the file you export as they are incomplete. If the records are green, then they will be included in the ILR file when exported. You can choose to select the Don't Export button if for any reason you did want to exclude a learner yourself, but the default is that the records in green will export and the ones in pink won't. Sorry, it skipped forward 2 slides. So there is a button in the top right-hand corner on the learner screen which will save the current record and all of the currently stored data. The learner entry tool doesn't save your data automatically as it's added, but it will save it automatically as the ILR learner entry application is closed. The data is saved in a file called internal.ilr. This file is created automatically when you open the application for the first time, and it will be saved in the same place where you have the application saved. If you delete that file, then all of your data will be deleted. So it is important that you take care with that. We recommend that every month you should export a new ILR file after making any amendments to your data. So that can include adding additional learners into the system, recording any achievements, amending any data that was incorrect. And it is important to note that the ILR learner entry tool won't validate your data, and it is important that you use FIS or the Hub to generate a validation report so that you can identify and correct any errors you have in your data, as that will impact on your funding. A new version of the ILR learner entry tool is produced for each academic year, and this will reflect the ILR changes, for example, the addition of any fields or the removal of any fields. When the 18-19 version is available, you can import your 17-18 ILR file, and your continuing learners will be migrated so that you don't have to enter them manually again. Once you've done that migration, you can then start to add any new learners for that new academic year. So we're now moving on to FIS, or the Funding Information System. This is a bit of software we provide to help training organisations check their ILR files. So FIS will check that the file format is correct, so it carries out schema checks on the XML. XML is the type of file that is used to transmit the ILR data. FIS also checks the validation that we apply to the data, and this is to ensure that only good quality data is accepted by our funding system. Just to note that FIS will do 95% of the validation that we do. There are certain validation rules that only get applied in the online system. For example, where we do a check of contracts, because the contract information isn't stored within the FIS system. When you open FIS, it will automatically check for any updates to the application and the reference data. So we update the application at least on a monthly basis for any additional functionality or correcting any defects that are identified. The reference data is updated at least twice a month. So that includes data on the learning aims that we fund, on postcodes, so any uplifts that are applied, and organisation data, so the list of organisations that will appear within the application. So the funding information system is downloaded from the front page of the hub. It does require you to have admin access at the point of installation. So where you have any restrictions on your laptop, you will need to work with your IT department to get that installed. Once you have the application installed on your machine, this is a screenshot of what you can see. So the amalgamate function allows you to join together files if you're using multiple MI systems. So that tends to be in larger organisations where they might have different departments focusing on different types of learning. The next option down is to import and validate a file. This is the key bit of functionality that we recommend that you use. And then you can select which reports you want to run. For apprenticeship starts after the 1st of May 2017, the only reports that would apply are the rule violation reports and the indicative earnings report. Any reports that are produced as PDFs are displayed on your screen and are also saved to your FIS workspace. Any reports that are produced in CSV or Excel are only saved to your FIS workspace, so they won't pop up on screen automatically. You can check the location of your FIS workspace and change this by going to the Tools and Preferences menu. FIS is used for multiple academic years, and you can change the year by selecting Tools, then Dataset and Reference. So you don't need to install a new version for every year. When the new year is available, it will be there as one of the downloads you can select to install through the Check for Updates process. We do recommend that you keep FIS up to date, as the reference data can have an impact on the funding that you're receiving or the validation that's being applied. So we do recommend that when updates are available, you do download them and install them. So the final step in the process is submitting ILR data to the agency. So we have a secure online portal known as the Hub, where we collect data files and share reports with training organisations. And each organisation decides who has access to this hub for their own organisation. So you need to register for an account using our secure website. If you're the first user to register, then you may need to contact the service centre to have your account approved. That first account becomes a super user for your organisation, and they are responsible for approving all future access requests, and they can also invite and set up roles for other users on the service. It is possible to have more than one super user if you want to ensure that you've got cover for any absences. There are two different roles available to users of the Data Returns tab on the Hub. So the Provider Submissions user, that role allows the user to submit their ILR return and to view the validation reports. The Provider Information Officer role allows the user to view the funding and financial reports that are made available. And it's absolutely fine for users to have both roles if they need to submit data and view the reports, but the separation does allow you to split the responsibilities if that is needed. So we publish a timetable on gov.uk to show when training organisations must submit ILR data. So the ILR collections have return numbers which go from R01 to R14, so that there are 14 returns for each academic year. And it's important to note that all collections close at 6 p.m. on the date confirmed on the calendar. So any files submitted after that time won't be accepted. The funding year runs from the 1st of August to the 31st of July, but data collections continue until late October when your final return is due. And after that date, no further amendments can be submitted. The reason we have given to October is so that you have time to notify us of any achievements or data that was received late in the year. It does mean that between August and October, there is a requirement to submit data returns for 2 academic years, as the new year will open on the 1st of August whilst the previous year is still ongoing. Once you're got your file ready, to submit the file on the Hub, you need to sign in, select the Data Returns tab. That will take you to a screen that shows your collections, and on there you'll select 1718 ILR. On that screen, you click on the Add File button. you click on to browse, select the file and then click on upload and submit, and that is your file sent through. We do recommend zipping your file before uploading to the hub because that will increase the upload time to make it quicker for you. We also do publish a data returns overview document on gov.uk which talks you through the process again and has screenshots of every step that you need to follow. Once your file has been submitted, it will be processed by the hub and a suite of reports will be made available to you. The rule violations report and the apprenticeship data match report are available on the submission screen, so alongside the file you've submitted. The rule violations report shows any errors or warnings you have for your submission. Any learners that have errors will not generate any funding or payments and they won't go through the data match process. So it is important that if you have any errors in your data, you review these, you can then go and correct the data and submit a new file to resolve those. The Apprenticeship Data Match Report shows the details of any apprentices which cannot be fully matched to a record in the apprenticeship service. So this applies to any levy-funded apprenticeships. So we do match the data to the records that are in the apprenticeship service that need to be approved by the provider and the employer. Any data match errors must be corrected before period close, otherwise no payments will be made for those learners. The Apprenticeships Indicative Earnings Report is available in the report zip file, which is published on the Business Reports tab. Now the zip file will have 20 reports in it, but for apprenticeship learners, this is the only report you need to be paying attention to. And this report will show how much money each apprenticeship has generated. Please note it will include learners who fail the data match process, but if these errors are not corrected, then the learners won't generate any actual payments. After the close of the period, a further zip file is published onto the Business Reports tab, which includes 3 key apprenticeship reports. The Apprenticeships Co-Funding Contributions Report, which for any learners that are co-funded shows how much money you're due to collect from the employer. The Apprenticeships Monthly Payment Report, which for every learner shows how much money you've been paid for each month. And the Apprenticeship Data Match Report. Now it's important to note this report might differ from the one produced at the ILR submission time as we rerun the data match process at period end. So if you've had an error where the 2 records didn't match, if you've corrected the data on the apprenticeship service without submitting an ILR file, you will still receive an updated report. So this checks the latest apprenticeship data we have. So finally moving on to communications. So FE Connect is an online peer support network which is hosted by the agency. And there are just under 2,000 members and several data discussions start every day. We've recently relaunched the website so that the website now is much simpler and faster. This is a really good opportunity for you to ask questions to other training providers. So if you're struggling with a particular query, there's lots of help available. To ask a question or reply to a thread, you do need to register for an account, but you can go onto the website and read through the blogs and the conversations without registering for an account. But it's just a really useful place to kind of ask questions to other providers who are working on the same things you are. And we also produce a weekly email newsletter called Update, which is a weekly roundup of business critical information. And we publish a monthly e-newsletter which is aimed at MI managers, software writers and suppliers, which focuses more on the data systems and reports, ILR and any data news. And you can sign up to receive a web alert when we publish these via gov.uk. So that is the end of the presentation. So happy now to take any questions that might have come in.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on the questions. We have had a couple. Just going back to when you were talking about the learner entry tool, if a provider has their own MI system, do they still need to use the learner entry tool, or Is the MI system sufficient?
The MI system will be sufficient. So the learner entry tool is an alternative to an MI system, and we provide that to the providers if they're not in a position that haven't purchased an MI system or haven't made that decision yet. They can use that as an alternative. As long as the MI system can produce the ILR file in the correct format, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, and where do providers get, if you can just clarify where providers get that from, if they wanted to download that entry tool system?
Yeah, so the application is downloaded from the front page of the hub. The right-hand side, there are links to kind of key information. There is a version for each academic year, so the previous versions are also available, but obviously you wouldn't need to access those, you just need the one for the current year.
Okay, that's great. And then another sort of comment that came in while you were talking about the learner entry tool was, it was just a please note type comment that you have to pin the app to your toolbar for data to be saved, and this wasn't given in the instructions that when the provider first set that up. Would we need to look at that separately, or?
You don't need to, as long as you've got the application saved on your computer. So for example, I have mine saved on my desktop. It's not pinned anywhere. Once you close the application, the data should be saved. But when you open the file from the hub, it will open up a zip file. You do need to extract the application and save it onto your computer. And then it will create the database in the same place where the application is saved. So either on your desktop or in a particular folder. But it is saved on the machine that you're using it on. So it's most suited to where you've got a single person do the data entry.
Right. Okay. So it might be just worth just double checking the instructions that's clear for providers in there.
Yeah, we'll double check the guidance and make sure that's fully tested.
That's great. Right, moving on to the new transfer facility that's come into force for the 10% transfer. There's a question that, so obviously levy payers will shortly be able to gift some of their levy to non-levy paying organisations. And this is a sort of a two-part question. So how should the non-levy payer organisations report these learners that are being funded in this way?
So the learners will be included in the same ILR file. So the training provider delivering the training would include those learners in the same ILR file that they submit their current learners in.
Right, okay. And when would they be now then counted as levy funded?
I'll need to take that question away and just double check with the apprenticeship service.
Right, yep.
Because we're still kind of finalising all of that information. There aren't any changes to the ILR structure, but I will clarify if there are any particular requirements of data you need to return and how they will show for you.
Right, that's great. So we'll include that in the Q&A document that is issued with the other documents from this webinar. Right, so I'm moving on to another question. We seem to have had an influx now, so I'll just work through them. So as a small provider, if that provider's records are complete at the end of August, do they still need to continue submitting the ILR until October if nothing changes? So is this kind of a monthly process that they need to do on that data?
If the data is all finished by the period 12 collection, which is the beginning of August, you don't need to make a further data return as long as you're happy that data is complete and accurate. But obviously there are two further opportunities at period 13 and 14 to make a return. Now at period 14, we normally send out a reminder to providers to submit data just to make sure they're kind of aware of the deadline. But if your data have been completed at period 12, we don't enforce that you make a submission. You will get a reminder just to kind of check that you're aware that that deadline is there. Right,
okay, so there's not sort of a monthly process. If there's no changes, then the learners sit in that system and that just, you know, the funding just is triggered monthly.
For the periods 1 to 12, so the kind of academic year, we would recommend you submit a file every month. just so that you're getting back your report, so to check, because some of the ILR fields may have like time dependencies on them. So we would recommend that you submit an ILR file every month, even if there aren't any changes.
Right, okay.
You do need, but what we would say is you do need to export a new file. Don't submit the exact same file from the previous month, because if you submit the same file twice, it will get rejected as a duplicate. So if you export a new file from your MI system or the learner entry tool, it will have a later time and date stamp in it, which will differentiate it for the system.
Right. Okay. And again, we can make that clear in the Q&A document that comes through. So with the tool, how many learners does that tool allow at any one time?
We support the tool for up to 500 learners in one academic year. The tool will continue to work with more than 500 learners, but we just can't guarantee how many it will go to, and it will start to impact on the system performance. So 500 is what we would support it up to in terms of kind of any kind of issues that you're having with it.
Right, okay, that's great. And where do providers log when employers have made payments through co-funding?
Right, so that information is recorded in the Apprenticeship financial records information. So that goes into the learner entry tool. It's under the learning delivery section. Now that information has to be recorded against the programme aim. Mm-hmm. And that's where you will enter the total negotiated price information and the payment records. What we can do as part of the Q&A, I'll put the exact kind of path to get to that section, but it's within the learning delivery part of the learners tab.
Right, oh, that would be great. Thank you for that. Right, a question on errors. So if you get errors once you have submitted an ILR and then correct those errors, do you upload the same file with the amended details, or do you have to upload a new file with the amendment so that the data is not duplicated?
You need to, so if you identify errors in your data, you will correct your data in your MI system or the learner entry tool. You do then need to export a new file, and it will have a later time and date stamp. So again, if you submit the same file, it would get rejected.
Right.
So we would recommend exporting a new file and then obviously checking your reports again in case any other errors have been identified. What I would strongly advise is that as early as you can, you upload your first file. So the collection is open for a minimum of 10 days per month. We try to be open for longer. The last 3 days of the collection period are the busiest 3 days. So we see a significant increase in the number of files, which obviously can cause a little bit of a queue at times. So we do recommend if you submit a file as early as you can and get those reports back, it gives you more time to correct any errors you've had and obviously seek any help you need. So just to load a file as early as possible. You can load as many files as you want to within a month. There is no restriction on how many files you can upload. So we would just say upload a file early, check your reports, and then you can put subsequent files in if you've got any amendments or additions. Right,
okay, great. Someone's asked a question about off the job. Is there any information on collection of off the job hours? Will that be collected through the ILR? And I know there's been some recent guidance on how that can be recorded, but it's not mandatory at present.
I believe there is a change for 1819 to record that information in the ILR, but I'd just like to clarify that and confirm it back to the Q&A document if that's okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And do the ESFA have a template that providers can use to collect all the information that's needed for the data entry?
I will check with the ILR team to what information is provided. They do have the provider support manual, which has a list of fields in it. I'm not aware that they've produced an actual kind of form that you can go away and get them to fill in, but I will just clarify that. I believe it's just a list of fields, which is in the provider support manual. But I will double check that and confirm in the Q&A document.
Right, that's brilliant. And if a provider's having issues downloading the FIS system, who can help them with that? Is that to go back to the help desk?
Yeah, if they contact the service desk, they will help, and they have an escalation to the technical team if it's more complex. Some of the key issues that we have with downloading software is the requirement to have admin access. Now, you only need the admin access at the point of installing it, not to use it, but your IT department needs to give you admin access, not install it under their admin account. If they install it under the IT admin account, the application won't work for the user when they try to run it. That's one of the kind of key issues we see. And it does need to have an internet connection because it will check for updates to it. So they do need to allow it to have that internet connection to get the update. So I know for some organisations where they have kind of quite high security levels, that can be more difficult. But the service desk will be able to assist with general queries, and if anything they can't assist with, they will escalate that to the technical team to provide more detailed support.
Okay, that's great. Still lots of questions to get through, but we've got plenty of time yet before the end of the webinar, so I will just continue on. Someone has put a comment on, I am not sure how many component aims I need to enter for a standard. Can you clarify?
There isn't a limit of how many you have to enter. You just need to record the qualifications that the learner is studying. So for some learners that will be maths and English and an MVQ, so the number can vary. We do have a guidance document on how to identify the aims that are associated with that particular standard. So I can pass that information on to go out with the Q&A document. So that's a guidance document used by the Learning Aims team to kind of help, especially with standards. So for frameworks, there's kind of a list of qualifications for standards that work slightly differently, but I can provide that information to go out with the Q&A document to assist identifying those qualifications.
Right.
It's just important to note when you're recording all those different aims that your data is consistent in terms of the program type and standard code, because those differences in those will cause errors.
Right. Okay. So we can clarify that, like you say, in the Q&A document. And there's a question around a pause in learning. So how do we register the correct details for a learner if they have to pause the course due to pregnancy?
Right. So the provider support manual includes a section on breaks in learning. So that's where the learner's going on a planned break, planned absence. That would cover maternity leave or sickness leave, and that will list exactly which fields you need to complete. So you will record the learner as going on the break in learning, and then it will tell you what you need to do when that learner returns. So I'll confirm the section details and put that in the document so you know exactly which section to refer to and include a link. But it is included in the provider support manual.
Yeah, that would be great. Is it possible to upload the ILR to the hub without doing it manually through the interface, such as connecting to some web services or endpoint?
No, the only option is to upload it manually, and that's the only functionality we have. So you do need to log into the hub and upload the actual XML file. I believe some MI applications have a link to FIS, but for the hub, you do have to log in and manually upload the file.
Right, okay, so that makes that clear. Employer incentive payments. On the remittance advice, how can we tell which employers we pay them to? Is there a report available to match the remittance advice?
Right, so this is an area that we've had quite a lot of feedback on, that it's difficult for providers. So on the monthly apps payment report, the employment incentives are grouped up with the provider incentive payments, which makes it difficult. So we've actually developed a new report which is due out for the R08 period close, which will list the learners and the incentive payment and which employer it's for. So that new report will be out at R08, which will make it much easier. So it is detailed at the minute on the monthly apps payment report, but it's quite hard sometimes to identify the individual payments. So this new report, which will come out at period end, as part of the zip file of reports, will give much more detailed information on those incentive payments.
Right, brilliant. Okay. So just moving on to planned end dates. Should the planned end date include the 3 months allowed for endpoint assessment? I
will need to double check that because I'm not sure on the specific guidance for standards. So I'll take that one away to double check to make sure we get the right information.
Yeah, because I know there's. Sorry?
I was going to say, it is important to note that what the planned end date, once it's in the ILR, that shouldn't be changed. So let me just clarify what you should follow guidance-wise for that.
Yeah. So I know there's been some concerns around how endpoint assessment fits in with everything, being it in the hands of the endpoint assessment organisation. So it would be good to clarify that.
Yes, let me double check that and come back to you.
That would be brilliant. On your contract allocation, how do you work out a monthly amount for each learner? I understand the on-programme payments and uplifts and the incentive payments, but trying to work these out and predict targets, that's kind of where that provider is finding it hard. Have we any help or advice on that?
Okay, so the monthly apps payment report will show you the payments for each aim. And that will show you the on-programme payment, the uplifts, the incentive payments, and that will forecast through. So it will show you what we're expecting the future months to be. Obviously, that won't take into account any achievements. So we will forecast forward. Also, the funding summary report, which is produced as part of your ILR reports in months, will forecast to the end of the academic year. Now that forecast is based on the last file we have, so obviously it won't take into account any new starts or achievements, but it will give you a forecast of what we expect payments to be for the rest of the year.
Right, okay. And just something we covered earlier, when you submit a new report to the ILR, it overwrites the previous report. So this question is around when you have 16-17 and 17-18, between August and October, will the system allow you to submit 2 separate ILRs?
Yeah, so there'll be 2 different collections set up. So they're right that within a period, every file you submit replaces the previous file, and we use the last successful file to generate the payments off. Whilst we're dual running, when you sign into the hub and go to the data returns page, you will have 2 links. You'll have one for 17-18, and then you'll see a link also for 18-19, and you'll need to go into the correct one to upload the file. So you'll have 2 different collection assignments set up, one for each academic year.
Right, okay, great. And another question on uploading. So can more than one person upload to the ILR entry tool on a different PC or laptop and merge the data?
Yes, but you would need to use Fizz to amalgamate your files. So the application will be saved to the individual's computer. So if you've got 2 people working on it, they're working on 2 different versions, you would need to use Fizz to amalgamate those 2 files together.
Right, okay. We have had another question about a more detailed explanation on the migration from one academic year to the other. So I think that's something that we can cover in the Q&A document. We can put some additional guidance in there if you would be happy to do that, Lynn.
Yes, that's fine.
Great. There's still coming in, these questions. There's lots to cover. So when registering a new employer to pair with a learner, you can't complete the employer registration without the employer's URN number. How do you complete this if the employer in question doesn't have a URN?
We probably just need to clarify which system we're talking about. They're talking about the ILR. You have to record the employer identifier. So that number you get from the employer data website that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So that's the employer data reference website where you can go and search the employer ID and generate a number if one's not available. And that's for the ILR. If the question relates to the apprenticeship service, so in terms of recording the agreement between the provider and the employer and the apprenticeship service, I'll need to take that away and get the apprenticeship service to advise on that. But from a data collections point of view for the ILR, the employer identifier is from the employer data reference website.
Right. Okay. And someone has asked, this is quite relevant to a meeting that I was at yesterday actually, about getting an ESFA rep to employers meetings, just to give them a sort of information session on the system requirements of becoming an employer provider. Is there any?
Right. Well, so we do have a team that deal with employer engagement. So I can definitely feed that back through to the relevant team to see if they can engage. So if we can contact the person directly that raised that question, I can pass their contact details on to the employer engagement team, and they can liaise with that.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, we can do that. I'm just looking through, there's still questions coming in thick and fast. I think we've got time for maybe a couple more, and then any that we haven't covered, obviously we will cover in the Q&A document. I'm just aware that time is ticking on. On the EDS system, is there a facility to bulk upload or bulk request employer IDs rather than having to source each one separately?
I don't believe so. I think you have to enter them one at a time because you have to enter details of workplace employees. But I will double check that and confirm in the Q&A document. But I believe you have to check them one at a time because obviously you need to check each one first to see if it already exists.
Yeah.
But I will check that and clarify that in the Q&A document.
Right, that would be great. Someone's asked, and I'm hoping that this makes sense to you, Lynn. But someone's asked, what's the difference between PDSAT and FIS? So what's the difference between those two?
Yeah. Okay. So the PDSAT is a data quality tool. So that looks to identify areas that audit might pick up and ask you to clarify. So where maybe you've claimed funding for learning that we wouldn't normally expect you to be claiming funding for. So that's looking at things that are past validation, but where there might just be an area of concern. FIS, the Funding Information System, is checking the validation of your data. So that's applying the ILR validation rules. So, for example, things like we won't fund an apprenticeship for a learner who was 10. So things like that are done in FIS, and it generates indicative funding reports. DSAT is more about data quality, and that's what that one's used for. So that, again, is a separate software that I can provide a link. There's guidance documents published on gov.uk, and they have a dedicated help desk as well. But that's more about the quality as opposed, whereas the ILR FIS is about the ILR validation.
Right, okay. And I did hear yesterday that the ESFA won't be looking at timeliness of standards because of the issues around sort of the endpoint assessment. Sort of that timeliness won't be as important as it used to be on the frameworks.
I assume that was relating to achievement rates potentially, is it?
Yeah.
Again, I can double check that with the policy team to clarify that, to get some further information on that.
Right, okay, brilliant. The questions are still coming in quite thick and fast, Lynn. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave it there for the Q&A session. Obviously, we can address anything else through the Q&A document. And then we can get that sent out to everybody that's registered for today's webinar, and that will allow us time to put some guidance links in there. I think just probably highlight the most important supporting documents that are going to be useful for providers to use throughout this process.
Yeah, if I could, I just wanted to mention one more thing. So we're actually running a project at the minute to look at the data collection applications and sort of developing a new improved system. So we are looking for kind of anybody who'd be interested in getting involved in the research for that. So what we'll do is, if possible, we'll include an email that comes out, the contact details for our contacts. If anybody would like to get involved in kind of having a chat with us about any issues they're having, or any suggestions they've got, then obviously we're looking to take on board feedback from people that are using the system, to see what we can do to improve it, to make the journey easier.
Right, that's great. So that's a real opportunity for providers to feed in and get involved in that research. That's That's excellent. Yeah. Okay, any final comments from you, Lynn, or?
No, that's everything, thank you.
That's everything. Okay then, well thank you very much for that. I'm sure that's given a lot of food for thought with everybody that's registered today. So just to mention a last couple of future apprenticeship webinars that are coming out of. We've got the 20th of March, we've got Alison Sumpter delivering a webinar on coaching and mentoring for apprenticeship success. And then on the 27th of March, we've got Alison again, along with Anna Morrison, on what employers want to hear when they call you about apprenticeships. So I'm sure people will be interested to tune into those too. So thank you very much everybody for joining us today, and I will now hand back over to Jill.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and thank you to both yourself and Lynn for today's presentation. And more importantly, thank you everyone for attending today's Future Apprenticeship webinar, How to Use the Learner Entry Tool and Complete the ILR. If you do have any other questions, please do contact the events team at AELP. Once you leave today's webinar, a survey about the webinar will appear on your screen, so we would be grateful if you could keep your browser window open and complete that for us. The scoring system is 1 is excellent and 5 is poor. You will then receive a follow-up email, usually within 48 hours, which will include a link to view a recording of today's webinar, along with a link to view a PDF of the slides. On behalf of ALP and our presenter, thank you so much for joining us, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.